this is a salute to the earth for Earth Day.
Mm.
I heard the many voices of the earth combine in unison, as in the falling of water and the murmuring of wind. I heard the many voices of humankind chanting in unison about the sun, the sound of their voices, the sound divine. I heard the many voices of the past return from darkness to surround the earth with melodies of vast simplicity. I heard the many voices of the future turning backward so that we could hear the infinite regression of their song. Happy Earth Day to all of you, Club of Rome
Beautiful.
and associate members.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
And we're
Beautiful.
extremely happy to have Silvia Zimmermann del Castillo as our fifth speaker. We have previously had the pleasure of having Mampela Rampella, who is the co-president of the International Club, with her colleague John Gilmore. Hi, John. He's here today in the room. And they talked about
Hello, everyone.
John's LEAP schools, which are located in South Africa from south to north, and the consciousness awareness emanating from Mampela's original Black consciousness awareness, and helping these students studying STEM to be able to open their consciousness and their cognitive powers to gain science and mathematic skills. Then we heard from Ted Manning and Sheila Murray about the first families in Canada, including how their educational tract had come along for the past 100 years, and what the present negotiations were so that they could have education from primary all the way through tertiary. Then we heard from Marilyn Mosley, who gave us a wonderful expose on her school she originated for Afghan girls' education during this civil war that's occurring in Afghan. And we have, following Silvia, Ada de Souza Coutinho from Brazil, who will talk about the skills, marketable skills they're teaching at her university, and Ruth Bambala Engo about HIV and AIDS education in Cameroon. So I would like very much to welcome Silvia, our very favorite person from Latin America, who has added so much to these many conferences of the Western Hemisphere we've had over time. And I'd like Dr. Ryan Jackson, to give us a few housekeeping details about how we're going to ask questions after Silvia talks. Ryan?
Okay, as usual, I am recording these meetings and I will be posting the videos to YouTube and then to usaclubofrome.org after the meeting. So if you don't want to have yourself seen, turn off your camera and don't comment, because everything will be recorded and I'm not going back to edit afterward. If you have questions for the speaker, put them in the chat box. You can direct them to everyone so that we can keep track and make sure we're not duplicating all the questions. All right, so be polite, turn off your microphones, mute yourself while you're not speaking, and you can turn off your cameras and just listen. If you want your pretty face to be seen, then go ahead and leave your camera on. It will be recorded. It will be here forever.
Thank you, Ryan. I'd like to introduce Carlos Alvarez Pereira, who is one of the top board of the International Club of Rome. He and Mampela Rampella and Sandrine Dixon de Cleve basically are the structure, the the beating heart of the International Club of Rome. And we welcome you here, as well as John Gilmore from South Africa and all our Canadian friends. We're very happy to have you here on Earth Day. In case you came in late, I read a Earth Day poem by Andrew Orkey. Marilyn Gordanier is the treasurer of the USA Club of Rome, an associate member of the International Club of Rome, and she has become close friends with Silvia. And Silvia and she helped the Pope about a year and a half ago with a wonderful, wonderful symposium at the Vatican on water. Marilyn?
Yes. Well, first, it's my pleasure to see Silvia again. I first met her in Mexico at the COR international meeting, and I fell in love with her. I thought, oh, this is a person of the heart with whom I'm simpatico, and we then had the opportunity to meet again at my house. We invited some other women, and she stayed for a week, and we had an amazing time together. We now we have a group called Sisters of the Heart, and
yes,
Sylvia's her resume is amazing. So I'm just going to give you an overview. It gives me chills. She's the president of the Argentine chapter of the Club of Rome, a writer, a lecturer, and a thinker. And she was and is a disciple and collaborator with the Argentine writer, and I please hope I'm saying this right, Jorge Luis Borges, with whom she studied Anglo-Saxon and Icelandic literature. She also studied social and cultural anthropology at the Sorbonne and lived in Sorbonne. She speaks multiple languages, and she graduated from Buenos Aires in philosophy. So she's a true philosopher artist. She's given lectures all over the world. I've had the pleasure to hear her speak in the Vatican, and it was truly beautiful. Spoken at the Sorbonne, France, University of Bologna, University of Bath, Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Ecuador, and the Academy of Writers in Azerbaijan. And she also is a columnist for the La Nación and its opinion section. So I'm always interested to see what she's going to share, which is so important that the thoughts and opinions are being shared around the world. It was an honor and a pleasure to work with Silvia on the Watershed Conference on Water at the Vatican, which she coordinated. And I want to say that in the most amazing moment, I was able to meet her in the Pope's quarters. I went to the door, asked to be let in. I had no identification, but I showed them my credit card. They asked for my passport. I said I'd left it at the hotel, and they said, "You look like a nice person, come in." And they let me into the Pope's residence, and,
yes,
and they put us in a separate room because we were so happy to see each other. They had to block us from the Pope, but it was quite, the security was quite interesting that day. She's working on a most amazing program called the Mukishi Okada Museum of Art, Dialogues in Paradise. And I've had the privilege of watching some of these beautiful dialogues about culture and art and science and Eastern and Western issues. And we were going to speak together in Japan, and unfortunately the coronavirus took that chance away for right now, on the beauty of education, which I think is something that we will do and we're holding in our hearts.
absolutely.
And she's also the International Executive Director of the Mukishi Okada Chair of Beauty at the University of Bologna. Her latest work, which I've been really impressed with, is attaining or accessing clean water to 5 different provinces, 16 communities in Argentina, which has been a passion project for her that she's worked on very, very, very seriously, and sent me some beautiful videos of this area. And she's working on the Week of the Tree that's organizing a planting of more than 1 million native trees throughout. I want to mention one other thing, which is that Silvia is an amazing tango dancer. She's taught me how to let a person know if you think they're a good dancer or not. And there's certain you do if you don't think they're a good dancer. She might even tell you about the rumor, the possibility that she danced the tango with the Pope in Argentina. And with that, it's a pleasure to introduce you to the beautiful and amazing Silvia.
So thank you, Marilyn. It was so beautiful, and it reminds me of our time together in Mexico, together with Anitra, and also, well, at the Vatican. We had a beautiful time there. It has been really an experience, and well, we hope to be able to repeat it. The Pope is always interested in a second conference on water. And well, then we had the pandemic, and we had what we have. And of course, Japan is always waiting for us and for dialogues in paradise. So Marilyn, thank you very much. It's a real friendship that we have constructed. And also with Anitra. Anitra has been my first friend at the Club of Rome. And it's a friendship that continues all through these years without any problem, because of something I'm going to talk today in my presentation on education. And of course, the unforgettable Andrew, my very first friend, together with Anitra. We met, I remember, in the first meeting I attended in Romania. And from that time on, I think it was 2010, our friendship is really beautiful. So thank you very much for this, this possibility, this opportunity of coming back to the exchange with the Club of Rome members in this time, to share and to discuss about questions that has to do with a main issue, as it is education. But let me tell you that I won't talk about education specifically in cases, just because I am not an educator. I am a thinker, I am a philosopher, I am trained in philosophy. So my approach to education, to this issue, is from a philosophical point of view. And let me tell you that the philosophy of education is quite a new branch of a philosophy. Quite a new branch, though there has always been philosophy of education. Most philosophers, all throughout the history of philosophy, since Greece onward, were concerned about education. It was the main issue. So that is the way I'm going to approach. And let me tell you, I wouldn't say it is a presentation. I would rather say that I'll be here thinking aloud and sharing with you, colleagues of the Club of Rome, concerns, philosophical concerns about education. And I will depart from this call, this invitation of UNESCO. UNESCO is asking the several countries to work on an education for a global citizenship, for the Agenda 2030 in education. And there is an annex that is dedicated to, of course, what is our main specificity of the Club of Rome, that is sustainable development as a part of education. as one of the objectives of education. And I think that that must be clear, because education has to do with much more. It encompasses so many aspects of the human being that would be able, if we can see in that whole vision of the issue, how far away we are today of what education means. So, what does education mean? What do we talk about when we talk about education? So, if you permit me, I would like to invite you to go to our sources and to move forward till our days in a bird flight to understand what I want to share with you. Let's go to Greece, where we come from. We come from Greece. We are Western civilization, the great Western civilization, and we come from Greece. And what did the Greek talk about when they talk about education? They talk about something that will maybe amaze you, surprise you, because we have quite forgotten that. Education had a beautiful word in Greek, paideia. Paideia. I'm very fond of the sound of languages. That is why I am so fond of English, and that is why I apologize for my English. So let's go to paideia. Paideia had to do with the paidos, the childhood, the kid. And what was education about? Paideia had an objective. Which was that objective? The objective of paideia was perfection, was a process of perfection, a perfectioning, an improvement. Improvement of what? Improvement of the human being. And this is not something silly. This is not something without importance. It is very deep. Because in that 5th century before Christ, and even a bit earlier, 6th century before Christ, they were really conceiving a world, a cosmos, a society, a civilization. So that perfection was a must. Athens became Athens because it aimed to perfection of what? To perfection of the human being. And why? Because the perfection of the human being was the perfection of the citizen. And the perfection of the citizen was the perfection of Athens. And the perfection of Athens was the world. And what was that perfection about? And to which goal, to which objective? To attaining the real. Another beautiful word, arete. What is arete? Isn't it a beautiful word? Arete was excellence. So, education was dedicated to improve the human beings attain arete. What is arete? Arete is excellence. Arete is virtue. Virtue, a word that we have neglected. Virtue. There could not be a civilization, there could not be a great and magnificent and beautiful Athens without arete. There could not be a democracy without arete. There could not be a democratic life, a city, a polis, without perfect human beings. And where they have to be perfect? How? In their thinking, in their talking, in their speaking, and in their ethics, in their acting, in their behavior. That is quite an important thing to consider today. Acting, thinking, speaking in arete, in excellence. The individual that was also a citizen for the arete of Athens. And so there we have the explosion of something beautiful that has to do with us, that is inside us, within us, philosophy for the thinking. Because it was not just to think, it was to think well, to think deep, not just to think. That was arete in thinking. Philosophy was dedicated to develop and to improve the thinking of the individual and of the citizen. And then we had how to speak, but to speak well. It was absolutely basic because they were to discuss common interests at the agora. And speaking should be of excellence because it was the way of expressing, and it was the way of expressing good thinking, but at the same time, the good speaking, the well say, to say well, feed back a better thinking and a wider intelligence. And last but not least, to act well. It was not a question of just acting or just behaving. It was the question of a man that was free, the citizen, to act well. And there came the branch of ethics, philosophy, oratory, that included poetry and ethics. Those three aspects of arete, of excellence, are the sources of Athens, which is the source of what we are today, the Western civilization. So Aristotle was also very concerned about education, paideia, as Plato was. Education is a main issue at the Republic, because a republic could be built and could be sustained long-term with a good education. And that education, Aristotle said that once it began, was all throughout the world, and even the adult had to continue being educated because human being is very feeble. Plato saw that. Plato was very acute in the way that human being is much more easier to go towards the mistakes than to the perfection. Perfection is a work. Perfection is an effort. Perfection needs thinking, needs discussing and dialogue, and this ethics. That was very clear seen by Socrates. But Socrates says something extraordinary, because education, paideia, was not the thing of inculcating, instructing. No, it was the other way around. Educere, in Latin. What does it mean? Educere means to lead and to guide the other, to bring inside out what he knows and what he has inside. And that is Foucault. We must wake it up. That is the work of the educator. To wake the student, to wake the kid, to wake the adult up, because he's asleep. He knows so many things. He even knows the theorem of Pythagoras. But you must help the adult and the young and the puber and the kid to bring that inside out. That is education. And well, that is the method of Socrates, madeutike. What is the madeutike? Is to bring out the baby, is the midwife. His mother was a midwife. He knew what he was talking about. And in a certain way, the educator must be a midwife, must bring inside out and not outside in. That is instruction. That is to inculcate. That is to inculcate good things, but is also to inculcate the interest of others. And education has to do with the freedom of the human being to be better. The freedom of the human being not to be no matter what, freedom of the human being to be better. And that is why ethics, we find ethics all through the different conceptions of education in Greece. Aristotle divided in periods the education of an individual, from the very first childhood, where he learned playing, and playing he brought out, inside out, what he felt about emotions, and he played. But it was when coming to the age of 7 years old that he was ready to start thinking and reflecting on the moral, on the things that he brought out playing. From the age of 7 years onward, ethics started and never ended. Ethics started. Ethics. And so it was at the age of 13 that, already reflecting on behaviors, the young puber was ready to a gymnasium, public education. A public education where started something very important that it's Socrates said, there is no improvement without dialogue. And there is no improvement without exchanging ideas, because the truth is constructed by everybody. It's a construction. What did they learn at the gymnasium? According to Aristotle, reading. Reading what? Reading the classics, reading the poets, reading the philosophers. And not only reading, but training the comprehension of what was read. And not only that, but also discussing, exchanging, and training the intelligence in very high level matters. And finally, the Lyceum. There came the instruction, may we say, biology, geography, logic, physics, philosophy, and music. Why? Because music had two works to do. The first was to train the intelligence in the abstract, in abstract intelligence as mathematics. But also it was used to depurate emotions, because ethics need a depuration of emotions, not to block them out, but to control them. That is ethics. Ethics never ended. And for Aristotle, the very good, the paideia, was to educate intellectually the intellect, but together with the education of moral. It could not be one over the other, parallel, together. One would educate the human being in skills, but the other will educate the human being in values. And that was Greece. And that was the legacy that Greece gave to Rome. What did Rome take from Greece? Art, philosophy, education. And what was the education of Rome about? What did the Romans talk about when they talk about education? Oh, that is incredible. Virtus, virtue. And what was virtue for the Romans? Which were the virtues that the human being should be educated since the childhood? Let me tell you, because it is beautiful. Auctoritas. What is auctoritas? Authority. But not the authority of the power, the authority of I am. No, it was the spiritual authority. Spiritual authority. It is not a question of saying I'm the head. It was the question that auctoritas was a spiritual auctoritas. Comitas, another word too. Courtesy. Clementia, clementia, kindness. Dignitas. What was dignitas? Dignitas was the respect to oneself. And to respect oneself was to be respectful in front of the others because of your decisions, because of your behaviors. If you have dignitas, you cannot fail ethically. And that was a must for a Roman. And there was something to construct and to sustain and to make greater and to make bigger and more powerful. It was Rome. And in between other virtues in which the Roman was educated since he was a little kid till all his life, was humanitas, that is civility, industria, hard work, prudentia, wisdom. Not professionals, just with a degree. No, wisdom. A word and a concept that we have forgotten. And well, salubritas. Well, salubritas had to do with health, has to do with mens sana in corpore sano, gymnastic, and has to do with cleanness, the baths, aqueducts. Siluitas, the jurisprudence. Look what Rome has given to the Western civilization. And something two more I would like to exchange with you and to share with you that I find is so beautiful. Veritas, truth, honesty, to behave honestly toward the other, and to behave honestly in the truth, even if that truth cannot be all the beneficial that you would wish it would be. And finally, they were a military power. Courage, but not only courage in war, not only courage in that, courage to be true, honest, wise, civil, courtesy, and spiritually high. Because it is, you don't need courage to be immoral. You need courage to be ethic. That is education. That is the strengthening of the Roman. And well, it's very interesting to see that one also a very important thing, and then I go back and I move. I don't want to bore you with all this promenade. Something very interesting is the way they considered language. Language was a key issue. And they got that, they inherited that from Greece. So as it was so expanded, the Roman Empire, there was a specificity for the Eastern and another for the Western part of the Roman Empire. The Eastern put the strength in Greek, for example, but always oratory, literature, music, and ethics. And what about the Western? That was a great contribution to the Western Western intelligence, the improvement of Latin. Latin is the most perfect language that ever existed. It is so perfect and so rationalist and so intelligent that there are paragraphs by Cicero of 2 pages, just a phrase, excuse me, a phrase of 2 pages, and you do not lose the sense, the meaning of what Cicero is saying because of excellence, because of perfection of the language, of the structure of the language. We come from there. We are sons and brothers and sons and daughters of Greece. And we are sons and daughters of Rome. And we are sons and daughters of something extraordinary that happened afterwards. Renaissance. We come from these huge revolutions, cultural revolutions, humanitarian revolutions, intelligence revolutions, and we come to Renaissance. And I would like, if you permit me, I would like to make a stop in a milestone. And we are commemorating 700 years of his passing. I'm talking about Dante Alighieri. And this is very, very interesting to make a pause here, because there are so many similarities with us, with our current times. Dante Alighieri was the father of Italian, beautiful, la bella lingua del Dante, Italian, because he found out that education was urgent. Florence was falling apart. Florence was falling apart with conflicts, cruelty, corruption. Florence was falling apart. Italy was going to disappear. So he said, the urgency of culture, but a massive culture, not a culture for aristocracy, for rich people. No. So he said, how we communicate all this with a language that people already exchange and share, but it must be excellent. It must be beautiful, because there is a feedback between what you say and what you think. But not only that, he said we must educate, and with what objective, which is the sense of education. And here we come back again. Perfection. And what is perfection about? Virtue. And that is why we've got the Divina Commedia. That is a milestone that leave the Middle Ages in the past and shift to Renaissance. The Divina Commedia is much more than a platonic love of Dante Alighieri to La Bella Beatrice. The Divina Commedia is it's an encyclopedia of the knowledge of his time, and it is a guidance to education. Towards what? Towards virtue. Beatrice is much more than his love, but Beatrice, and it is very important now to remember that he was the first feminist we could talk about. Beatrice was the symbol of what has to be attained by education. Spiritual education, human education, intellectual education, till you attain perfection. It is interesting to know how Dante Alighieri died, because it has several similarities with our times. He died by malaria, the pandemic of malaria of his times, coming back to Ravenna from Venice, where he gave a lecture on science. He was fascinated and he was dedicated to science, but he did not neglect what had to do with the essence of human being. There we come from. And he gave place to Renaissance. That means the construction of the world that is today our world, nations. And it's something very interesting. There was an awareness, a consciousness that a new world was being built. And that is why it is the time of utopias. Nowheres, but ideals that regulated the desire. Utopias where the examples of perfection, perfection of men and perfection of societies, and powerful societies, of golden societies, rich societies, but not because of power and economy, no, because of virtue. So now I come to our days. I will not talk from now on of what we all know. Science made an explosion. It was so extraordinary. The way it developed, the way it developed mostly like a magic. So human beings and societies and politicians and thought that it was not needed to continue deepening in so useless things as philosophy, ethics. They were so useless because progress itself, by itself, we do not know how, when, nor where, human being will be better. And so all our strength was directed only in intellectual development of certain skills, neglecting what education was about. Education was not instruction. Education could host instruction, could house instruction, but education was much more than instruction. Education had to do with developing and fostering the love to knowledge and not the greed to information. So here we are. And it is not because we come from modern times, but because we still live and dwell in modern times that has brought us to this catastrophe. And not because we have no science, and not because we have no technology. But one thing that I've learned a week ago is that the two main beautiful icebergs in Antarctica, they have reached their point of no return. They are melting for good. And in the meantime, we continue thinking, oh, skills in science and skills in economy and skills in bioeconomy, in skills in technologies. Very well. I do not say no. This is what Gadamer says is our horizon of world. Horizon of world. But there is an disequilibrium. And Aristotle said, there must be together forever. And it was Theodore Roosevelt that said something incredibly intelligent. He said, to educate a man in his mind and not in his morals is to educate a threat to society. And here we are. But I'm not pessimistic. But anyway, it's the only information that I will share with you, because it is so representative of how education has failed. You know that over the 20th century in the developed countries, a test has been constantly done of the IQ, the intellectual quotient, I think you say, coefficiente intelectual. And it is something incredible because those tests that were done every 5 or 10 years, depending on the different countries, were really marvelous. Because they showed that in the same place, Oslo, Paris, New York, Germany, Brussels, the IQ increased every 10 years, depending on the societies, from 2 to 7 points. So, those developed societies were every 10 years more intelligent. Marvelous. That is really amazing. And that was the victory of science, of technology, because there was a better health system, better nutrition, and good education. Nevertheless, something happened. It started in Norway that put on the alarm. He said, something is happening. Because this Flynn effect that was proved all through the 20th century suddenly stagnate. And not just that, it reversed. When Norway called to see that, they say, oh, no, what happens is that it's not so. And it is a test in the same place, in the same kind of population, with the same sanitary system, with the same food system, what happened? And they say no. It happens that with the new technologies, there are so many skills that are leaving aside other skills that are no more useful. But from the 1990s, half of the 1990s, France, Belgium, Denmark, Germany, United Kingdom started making the tests and updating them to the general technological miracles. And it was confirmed very severely since the second half of the 1900s. We are every 10 years less intelligent. A fleet effect reversed. So here comes what is my specialty, or my specialty, my interest. Philosophy of education. What happened? It is not food. It is not health. Where is the problem? It is not just technologies, they are good. What happened? And I don't want to talk about underdeveloped countries. I prefer not to talk about that, because must be an abysmal. So here comes, and they say, why don't we focus on education? What happened with education? Well, what happened with education? What Aristotle warned, what Theodore Roosevelt said, must be a harmony, because human being is much more than skills. Human being should be much more than skills, should be a better being every step by step of his existence. So they said, well, what can we do? And there are good news, because the warnings and the proposals from the philosophers of education that are really very concerned about this fact, and it has to do with the environmental, with the climate change. It has been to do with all that. It is not something, oh no, let's not waste our times with these things because we have urgencies to solve. Very bad. The very first urgency is the human being. So they said, our suggestion to educators, to universities, to rectors of universities, is to counteract this trend, is to get out of the bandwagon of new technologies that are there. They will always be there. They are our horizons of world, but they are tools. And we invite professors, teachers, rectors, educators to cultivate reading, comprehension, humanism, reflection, and ethics. What they saw, and what is this feebleness of intelligence? What has it to do with this diminishing of intelligence? What has it to do? It has to do what it consists of. It consists that there is not power of concentration. Nobody can concentrate in just words, just talking, just exchanging ideas, because we are immersed in a visual culture. And we need to see, as Santo Tomas, but in another way, we need to see and to catch And what we catch and what we see, we catch information that is not processed, because there is a laziness in thinking. There is a laziness in reflecting, and there is a cowardice in thinking matters that have to do with the essence of a human being. So let's go to positive things. This is the panorama. This is the scenario. And so we find, let's make an education for sustainable development. Oh, I agree. But from where? Telling that it is good to plant a tree. We do it in Argentina. We have just planted 500,000 trees, native trees, and we are planting at the Club of Rome in Argentina 1 million more trees. But how? But we can say, oh, come here, put the little tree here. No. We must make it be part of an ethic. It must be acknowledged and ethic. We must discuss about that. And there are very good news. For example, in Spain. In Spain, they are discussing about including ethics. They see the importance, and that is brilliant in Spain. We must include ethics urgently. From the last year of the lower school onward. Not just civic, because they are different things. Civic education, well, what is a constitution about? How are the judges elected? No, that is one thing, but there is a prior urgency. Reflection on our behaviors. Because all this collapse is because of our behaviors, our lack of ethics. And it is not proclaiming that we want to lower the emissions of greenhouse gases that we are being ethics. That is the point. One more thing, and I'm coming to the end. Here in Argentina, I was quite surprised. Lastly, a week ago, more or less, a university of the north of my country, in Chaco. The rector said, this is serious. Ethics will be compulsory subject in every career. Of course, when you are ethic one to the other, you will be ethics with the other, with life. And finally, coming back to the Agenda 2030, UNESCO, that I approved. But it is an expression of desire for the moment, because I don't see an ethical world to be able to comprehend each other, to cooperate. They will proclaim it. Politicians are very good in proclaiming. But the thing is that must be achieved. And here we have who gave the first step. As you know, I am very fond of Japan, and I work very, very much with Japan. Marilyn will come to Japan. Anitra will come to Japan, of course, to Dialogue in Paradise. And Japan They gave the first step. They are an admirable society. Why? Because ethics is naturalized. They have reflected so much in being ethics that they are naturally ethics. They can't be otherwise. And so, in the new era of the new emperor, that is a good friend of the institution with which I work, they give to the world the first revolutionary education system for a global citizenship.
Mm.
You know, how did they, languages. Very interesting to see the detail of the language in Japanese, the meaning of the words. They call their new revolutionary system Futoji no Henko. What does it mean? Courageous change. Courageous change. Because once more, changes need courage. And what is this system about? It's so incredible. It consists of, it's a program of 12 years. A program of 12 years with just 5 matters, subjects, just 5. But what are they about? Arithmetic and business, because they are instructive in a real world. They must be instructed in arithmetic and business. Reading what? Reading the literature of the world. They start reading very little, 1 page per day. Reading, comprehension of the reading, discussion on the reading. And they finish reading 53 books compulsory per year that are analyzed, but not from a literary point of view, analyzed in every sense, in ideas, in world, in culture, in. So, what else? Civism, respect to the laws, respect to the others, respect to the rules of coexistence, tolerance, altruism, respect to ecology and environment, and of course, ethics, reflection on those respect. Is not very difficult for Japanese people to be respectful. But when you respect another, when you respect your neighbor, you will very easily respect the ecology, the environment, but not the other way around, because the other way around is an instruction to be in fashion. So, what else? Computation, of course, naturally. And 5 languages. 5 languages, not only Japanese, but Chinese, 1 Latin language, English, 1 German language, Arabic language, from every. Why? Because 1 language is 1 culture, and it is the comprehension is 1 perspective. 2 languages are 2 cultures, and it is a widening of the comprehension for cooperation. And with each language that they learn the culture of that language, they learn the art of that language, they learn the literature of that language, and they become citizens of the world.
Beautiful, beautiful, Sylvia. I just want to make sure we have time for our attendees to ask you questions. And I thought I would
Okay, of course.
jump in then because that was such a beautiful moment.
Thank you. So here we are. This is our reality. And I think, to conclude, I'm not being pessimist. I think that we should come back to the sources, to our sources, because Western civilization has everything inside. We must bring it inside out again and correct our mistakes. That is why I wanted to end this chat, this conversation with the only image that I will share with you, because I don't believe in PowerPoints, but I do believe in art. And if you please, Ryan, can share this, is it possible?
Ryan?
Yeah, I will put that up. So, one moment.
Then I think we'll have some comments by.
This is arete. This is excellence. This is virtue. Look, contemplate that image. That was the objective of education.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sylvia. This has been a very rich tour through from ancient times through Greece, certainly through Rome, through Western culture and through Eastern culture. It has been extremely, extremely relevant. And I'm going to ask some of our other speakers who gave us such wonderful offerings to comment on this wonderful tour that Sylvia has given us. John, would you please give us your thoughts at this point?
It would be a privilege. Thank you. Silvia, you have really just brought to us a great joy of the possibility of reclaiming a lost humanity. And you said right at the beginning that you would just have a thinking conversation with us. And I felt like I was in your thought processes with you and sharing and connecting and saying, wow, yes, I call that something else, but I know what you're talking about.
Thank you.
So thank you for that. And I just can relate so strongly in the African context, where oppression and colonial history has forced us to internalize elements of either the colonizers or being the oppressed. And so, as you know, Paulo Freire identified that need for conversations on a daily basis. And I'm interested to know how the ethics, because ethics can be very cerebral and they can be very much head ethics. The ethics that I imagine and feel, in fact, I know that you're talking about are the ethics of the heart, the ethics of the spirit. And that's a very difficult process to take people who imagine themselves to be good teachers, lecturers or professors, operating in a cerebral way and keeping safe and disconnected from the pain or the hurt or the woundedness or the history of the hurt. So I loved your references to the education being the awakening, the reawakening or the first awakening. And the beautiful thing about that is that it's the daily awakening. It's not an awakening, it's the process of awakening.
Yes.
And to extrapolate that to become fully human. And the way you tie that in then with the need for us to take seriously the reality of the world is in meltdown, and the awakening now is not an optional awakening. And yet, you know, and I'm sure in your country, much like in the southern part of Africa, there's this huge denial of the need for these awakenings. And there's almost a kind of avaricious desire to embrace the Western competitive spirit of rugged individualism at the expense of the good of humanity. And so the work I'm doing and the work I spoke about really was the work of consciousness raising and the work of moving from the rugged individualism towards deep human interdependence, which includes the interdependence with the world in which we live. So thank you for inspiring and giving me a new perspective on the same language or the language I use, and replacing it with some really beautiful pieces. Much appreciated. But I would like your comment on that transition from the paradigm of cerebral teaching and learning, which sometimes even pretends to be something other than that. How are you embracing that, and what are you recommending for that? And
One
you.
moment, Silvia, before you respond. I'd like next Marilyn to comment, then Ryan, and then Sharon, Miriam, and Rocio, whatever it is that they would like to discuss with us. So, but please go ahead, Silvia, and comment to John.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much for your beautiful feedback. I feel so close to you because I feel the way you work. And, you know, ethic is not just a brain, a rationalist, how do you say, a rationalist analysis of morals. Ethic is a reflection, must not be because we must be very careful, of course, as you say, an ethic of that sort can guide towards several interests, of course. The ethic is to stand face to face to the moral, because we all live in a moral. We all have a moral. Cosa Nostra has its moral. And you belong to a moral, and there can be an inculcated ethics that made valid that moral. The ethic that Aristotle talked about, the ethics that Dante Alighieri, l'école de Chartres talked about, was the ethic of stopping and reflecting. You yourself, the educator, guide the student, the pupil, to reflect himself on his own behavior.
Thank you,
And
Silvia. We've got 10 minutes for 5 people to talk. Okay?
Yeah.
Thank you. Marilyn,
Sylvia,
your comments?
Sylvia, thank you so much. I wanted, for years I've been thinking, I have this vision that what if every leader in the world was required to attend, in order to be a leader, to attend a wisdom school, in which these attributes would be designed with self-reflection, reflections of the heart, integrity, and that they would continue to be responsible back to this wisdom school, similar to the beginnings in Greece and Rome. And I see this after today, listening to the news in Brazil and in Japan, not in Japan, but in India and in the United States, that what is needed is a collaboration so that leaders that emerge have all been trained with these skills. And as John says, you know, you have to create a community to create that opportunity so that leaders can bubble to the top, and in many different ways. But specifically, I'm talking about political leadership, and so that we can have a really dramatic paradigm shift in the way that we are moving forward as a globe. And I wonder if you've thought about that at all.
Sharon, could you share your thoughts with us?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Silvia, for an amazing conversation and all that you shared related to education and instruction. As a scientist, as an ecologist, and as a musician, I especially appreciated your point early on where you talked about the value of music. And that has made me think also deeply, actually, for a good number of years now, about the role of creativity in science and in understanding and in learning. And I've been working on developing and have several times now taught a course on cultivating creativity from an education standpoint, but the value that comes from that is, or that the students seem to get from it, is the need to pause with the onslaught of information and to be able to take time to ponder. And I think you said to contemplate, and that's part of what comes with all of these ethics and things, but it also is really valuable for being creative. And I think in this world, one of the things we get with, and I won't call it education, but with instruction, is this nonstop onslaught of information coming in without any training in how to pause and to distill it. And that's part of where you were, Marilyn, that wisdom takes time. It takes time to ponder these things. And so just
we want to get in Ryan and Lalith and Miriam. Go ahead, Ryan.
Well, we are living in a world that is so anti-intellectual. Nobody really has an intellectual curiosity anymore. Well, the vast majority of the population and the politicians. And so how do we get people to think ethically when they don't even want to pick up a book?
Well,
Lalith,
that is
tell
that
us
is
your
the
comment.
educator.
Thank you.
Lalith,
Thank you. That was such an amazing presentation. Thank you so much, Silvia. My hairs were standing on edge as you were speaking. And I also think that as a man, we have to take responsibility for the 2,000 years of the predatory culture that we have created. So, as you said, I'm a mindfulness practitioner and I teach meditation and mindfulness. We have been trained in our minds to compete in the last 500 years and told a story that it's a dangerous place out there, the world, and that we have to be a predator to survive. But when we find some quiet time and meditate, we realize that we come through kindness and compassion, and the fact that as human beings perpetuate ourselves through two people coming together and becoming vulnerable to each other, to become one with nature, one with the universe. And that's that fusion that we're talking about, but we have been taught to separate, and the nuclear bomb is the greatest separation, the destruction that we create. So I think, education, as we all know, is the primary way. I've been teaching young people mindfulness in the last month in Toronto school board. And I'm so glad that they're teaching the reflective and contemplative education already now to these young people, because that's what's needed for what we are leaving behind for them in the future. So thank you. And I'm so pleased to also hear everybody else's comments. I feel I'm in August company.
Miriam, can you unmute yourself? Thank
Okay.
you.
Hello, everybody. Silvia, I am Silvia's student. Thank you for this invitation. It was a great conversation for the topic that is the best topic in the world, education from the spirit. This is a dialogue. We need to sit down on the floor with pupils, with students, and connect from the heart, with mindfulness, with nature, with art. So I am doing this from my little seed, and I'm cooperating with this amazing world. I am very hope about art as you, Silvia. I'm trying my best, and thank you for this amazing conversation. I took a lot of notes, Silvia.
Oh, thank you, Mariam. Thank you very much.
So much, everybody. Thanks.
So I think we've had an extremely rich afternoon with Silvia And I think she's taken us a very long way. I just have to say to Lalith, I think it's more like 4,000 years that the women gave up their power. Certainly not 10,000, but probably 4,000. And we're now, Ryan can turn off the recording. And if a few of you wish to stay and chat more one-on-one with Silvia, that's fine, but we want to end the official recording, which will be put onto USA Club of Rome Annex. Is that correct, Ryan? You want to tell us?
usaclubofrome.org.
usaclubofrome.org. Under videos, is that correct?
Yes, and it will also be on our YouTube channel.
And also on our Facebook page.
All right.
So if anybody wants to go back and